Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Antonio again, showing up for the weekly talk that I do. Sorry, I'm a little late this morning, technical difficulties. You gotta love when things get updated and sometimes get to squeeze out other things that we're serving. But anyway, today is going to be an interesting topic about supplements and junk food, uh, body and mind. One of the things that inspired me to talk about this today is that I regularly get phone calls from inquisitive clients or patients or potential patients and in the interest of things that they find on the internet, and they're trying to self-medicate using Dr. Google. They try to self assess themselves. They try to um, you know find the best ways of taking care of themselves by piecing things together. And more often than not, um, it's not ideal because if a person's struggling with some kind of health issue and then they Google it, it's sort of a really narrow approach to trying to address their own system without understanding there's a bigger picture that has to be addressed. So, for instance, if someone is looking up herbs or supplements or things to do for anxiety, um, although Google can be useful with certain considerations around like what to do for management of anxiety, just because it exists on the internet doesn't mean it's exactly absolutely meant for that individual person. So it gets dangerous when we self-diagnose. Um, in med school, med doctors are taught, and in holistic school, holistic healthcare practitioners, professionals are taught not to really self-diagnose and or self-treat, essentially, because it's hard to see yourself clearly in a whole big picture um, when someone can assess for you from an outer perspective what needs to be assessed properly so that things can be followed according to a certain protocol. We can get caught up in our own head and misunderstand information. Um, and so, anyway, so when people look up things to address certain things that they feel like they're identifying with as an issue or potential issue, it is best to consult with a primary health care provider, definitely in the Western medicine, and or if you're interested in following up with other kinds of practitioners or professionals, of course, getting more information is best. In Ayurveda, and the understanding of the right use of mind and how to determine correct information or learning the proper information or gaining the best knowledge, there's a concept called Prajnas, which is defined according to Ayurveda as those means which are meant to give us a sense of knowledge of a particular subject or topic or something like that. And within the Pramanas, there is a topic called Pratyaksha, which is about direct knowledge. So, you know, basically defined as finding from direct sources one on one experiences, your personal experience, or just an objectified um, experience with whatever it is that you're being presented with as the direct knowledge. It's direct, it's right there, it's observable, and essentially can be measured in that way. Anumana, which is inference, and that has to do with a lot of the scientific knowledge that we see today as we infer based on facts, based on information that gathers. Aptopadesha, which is from a teacher, and teacher is not just an individual who's a teacher, but a recognized, reputable source that has gained the information through the other means of study and practice and proper exploration through scientific methodology that has been substantiated and agreed upon on a standardized level across the board, which all brings it together through the other topic or concept called yukti, which is logic, reasoning, and deduction. So there's a whole scientific process that is undergone when someone's trying to investigate whether or not something is adequate, appropriate. You come up with a hypothesis, you go through a series of steps to come to a conclusion, and then the conclusion will either confirm or deny the original hypothesis. Anyway, without getting too boring with the scientific methodology, it serves a purpose, and the point of this is understanding that it's important to know through proper means of knowledge what to do when we're looking for supplements and how to supplement things to take care of ourselves. It's great to acknowledge that we want to take care of ourselves. So when we are looking up on the internet something that pertains to something we're experiencing, great. That's a level of self empowerment, of course. And it doesn't stop there. It's about taking it to the proper authorities and using your own um, personal abilities of wisdom, insight, and experience with yourself, because essentially you've been with yourself longer than anyone else has been. Um, and so taking all that information as the key power player and central power player to wherever you go, with whoever you interact with, that is also an authority. It's never just handing over power to someone else. That tends to be more of the allopathic model where you just go and they tell you what to do, and that's basically it. The holistic module, which is, reductionist and also expansionist, holistically considering things in a bigger picture and smaller picture. um, it's important to see that there is a bigger picture and smaller picture. So taking it in that whole picture when you're going into any setting and taking the wisdom from what everyone else has to share as a piece of the puzzle that's going to help you find resolve within yourself. So when people call and ask about supplements, it's unethical to just say, "Oh, sure, here's an herb you just Googled, and it's considered highly useful for whatever your symptom is." It's unethical just to say, "Sure, take it," because who knows if that herb is the right one for you? You don't know. You can experiment with yourself and try that and take the risk of it either working or not working. Um, and then what also becomes dangerous is that sometimes people just start to add up a long list of supplements of things that they read that seem to be verified or reputable on the internet as, oh, this is good for this, and this is good for this, and this is good for this. And all of a sudden you have a whole kitchen cabinet filled with supplements that you read that were really good for you. But really, at that point, it's misuse of knowledge and it's also abuse of supplements. And now you're creating a much more complicated situation. Hey, Demir. Hey, James. Good morning and hello. Um, and so you're creating more complications by adding to this long laundry list of things that you're looking up. It's better to get a bigger picture outside of yourself and then reflect things back to you step by step. It's smarter that way too, because regardless of the supplement or if it's an herb or things like that, everything has a tendency towards having a side effect. If it's misused or underused or misunderstood or inappropriately used, wrong dosages or just wrong formulas, or just, there's so many things that can go wrong. There's no quick fix. So we live in a society, in a culture, in a Western mindset, we're looking for quick fixes all the time. And in Ayurveda, there is no spa treatment or spot treatment. More often than not, it's a much more complex situation with understanding what the diet plays a role as and what the lifestyle plays a role as. It's not just, oh, I'm suffering from constipation or anxiety or depression or PTSD or stress, and I'm just going to take this thing to take care of it. Well, Ayurveda is a much more complex system. It's a system of medicine that's been established for thousands of years, and it understands the complexities of human life. And it supports life by encouraging the healthy to remain healthy and to help cure the diseases of the sick or alleviate the diseases of the sick. And so taking the right information in is important. And so taking the right information in requires the master executor who determines information coming in to be in a much grounded place. The master executor is the mind. The mind uses the senses to navigate its way in the world, picking up information all the time. And the senses love the world. They love to look at things and smell things and hear things and see things and taste things and touch things. So, all the five senses, touch, taste, smell, listening, seeing, where there's a gravity to the senses. The senses want to be in the world playing. But what happens is that each of the senses finds an attraction towards something, and it starts to create more of a division because our focus is now outwardly, and the executor is trying to interpret all the information as quickly as possible. And the mind does, according to yoga and Ayurvedic philosophy, work in a one step at a time fashion. Even though we think that the mind and that we're capable of multitasking, we may be able to because we've trained or cultivated the body and nervous system that way, but it doesn't mean that it's actually correct. Because there is going to be a cost at some point, because at some point the senses are going to be burnt out and, overstimulated. And that creates other issues, and usually located in those specific areas that the senses have been stressed by. So when we're taking in the external supplements of life as part of life, as the things that are isolated from life, as those things that bring us a sense of gratification, we kind of forget the bigger picture, the whole picture, how everything comes together. And so when we're looking at the basic level of what are these supplements to make me feel good, this herb or this food that I read about, or this antioxidant that comes from a berry, or this juice that has this, and it's an endless list, because we're humans. We create things, and we create endless opportunities and things to enjoy. Um, but is it the right combination for you? Is it the right amount for you? I talked about this last week, matra, which in Ayurveda is the concept that discusses portions. And, you know, there's overuse and underuse and inappropriate use of the senses. And if we're following the senses, then we can easily get lost in the world, and we forget the center of who we are, because now the mind is just focusing on everything else instead of coming back to center and just evaluating things, seeing how it feels, using the body as a gauge for all these external stimuli. So it's understanding what's the purpose that this supplement is about, what's the end goal that I'm trying to gain from this usage of a supplementation. The word itself, supplement, means that it's secondary to something that's primary, and primarily, what's the most important thing? Our health. Our health, which is dependent on where's our mind at in any given moment, and where's our body and health within those two systems within any given moment of time. And when we use a supplement, we're using the supplement to add in to what might be missing as a component to those bigger pieces, which is diet and lifestyle and all the things within the lifestyle, exercise and sleep, and just daily practices of things that we do to sort of cultivate the mind. How are we cultivating the mind on a day-to-day basis? It's food for thought, right? What are we looking at? What are we smelling? What are we hearing? What are we tasting? What are we touching throughout the day that's gathering information and that's going to direct the mind in a way that's either going to create a sense of harmony or disharmony? You know, Facebook, if you're able to use your mind in a way that is conducive and positive to your well-being, you'll know what things to scroll past through. And when you have a certain level of deeper knowledge and connection to this deeper sense of clarity, then you can easily tell fake news from real news. And it's a cultivated practice, like anything. Waking up and eating right and sleeping right and exercising right, it doesn't just start overnight. It takes time. And so this is something that's worth it. We are worth it. Our health is worth it. Our life is worth it. And, under the current conditions of COVID, we're being taught how to come inward. It's not a coincidence. It's not any punishment from the gods or any deities or anything. There's no external force that is punishing us. It's just an understanding of how we're living in life, and life is teaching us through nature of where, when the pendulum is swinging from one side, and how to go to the other side. And there's less of the judgment, and if we have less judgment, we might find ourselves more easy within the context of the current situation and circumstances. So, hi, Melanie. So supplements are supplementing to our life to improve the quality of life. And, with supplements, we can overdo it. We can be overly busy with activities, and we can be overly busy with how much we're eating and what we're eating. There's just, a whole understanding that extremism doesn't work, right? We know this. All the different philosophies, all the different ancient philosophies and Buddhism and things like that tell us extremism does not work. It's finding the happy medium that works exactly for you, who you are, where you are within this given moment in time. And so when we're finding the right supplementation, it can be actually really simple. We don't even have to have a cupboard filled of like 40, 50 different herbs that we have to take every day. That's not medicine anymore. And, it always alarms me when a patient comes in and says they're seeing, let's say a holistic doctor or a functional medical doctor, and they come in with a big bag of supplements. And I'm like, what is this? And they're like, oh, my functional medical doctor gave me all these supplements, or my holistic healthcare doctor gave me all these supplements. And I'm like, you're taking 17 to 35, and I've seen 35 bottles. I've taken pictures of them and posted them in the past. That's not medicine anymore. That's not how medicine works. That's not how holistic medicine works. That's not how regular medicine works. When we see that there's an increase in medications and the quality of health is either declining or just not responding, there's a problem. And that means the bigger root has not been addressed. The deeper root has not been assessed appropriately to determine, like, what do I really need to put? And in Ayurveda, if anything, the more complex a person's situation is, the simpler we have to go. That's just the opposing gunas, or the opposing qualities. We play the game of the opposites. So if there's too much, then we go towards too little. If there's too little, we go towards building up more and finding that right medium that works for that individual. you know and so junk food for the mind is when we're reading things that are just not appropriate, when we're processing information that can cause more disheveling and sort of a discordant feeling in the body that creates an angst or discomfort. you know you use the body as a gauge to determine, like, what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And when you start to really come inward, you start to notice, and things start to land in a way that you're like, no, that's not true. And you can start questioning things from a place of clarity versus confusion or fear. The fear-based mind is not clear. It just can't be, because it's in a hyper-stimulated place. It's more sympathetic response. So if you're in a flight or fight state of mind every day, how are you able to make decisions from that place? If you're acting as if every moment that your life is about to engulf you by something external, how are you able to make a decision? If it truly is that you're being presented with something that's going to stress you and eat you up in that moment, then of course you create space by removing everything else that's not important in that moment, and immediately your body's systems kick in the way they should, and then you get out of the situation as quickly as possible, and then your body regenerates and establishes homeostasis, which is through the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's a natural cycle. The body is designed to do this. More often than not, people are hyperactive. People are sort of hyper vigilant. People are hyper responsive. And when do we actually get a chance to reset? Ideally, when we are going to bed, when we go to sleep at night, and we're getting the right 8 hours of sleep, 7 to 8 hours of sleep, 6 to 8 hours of sleep, depends on a person, you wake up feeling refreshed. You feel as if you were able to cut off everything from yesterday and create a new start to today. And how amazing is it to start the day anew with the things that can be inspiring? Do you put on the news immediately when you wake up and fill your mind with all that chatter and all that noise and all that craziness? Or do you start the morning off with just silence and having awareness of when you're removing the comforter from your body and you're listening to the sheath kind of crinkle? And then you're opening the shades and the windows and you're seeing the sun come in. And they're maybe, playing some prayers, some sort of mantras, or some sort of like calming music in the morning. It always alarms me in the morning, in a way, in my nervous system. And I find it interesting when, sometimes when I would have to wake up really early in the morning and I would hear some sort of crazy hip hop or rap in the morning, or some sort of violent kind of like sounding vulgar music. And I'm like, I can't, my nervous system can't even process that. It doesn't like it. It feels like, oh, and then it creates a subtle neurological angst in my system. And then I start the day that way, and it's not okay. Like I like starting the day with like a sense of like, this is really great. I have a lot to look forward to today. With an inner prayer, a certain affirmation of like what I would like to set the intention out for today. Starting it from that place feels much easier on my nervous system and on many people's nervous systems when you start that way with that level of intention. And these are the things that we consider when it comes to what are we supplementing our health with. Are these sensory driven stimuli appropriate? Do they make us feel good on a deeper level? And we feel it. When we get to that feeling place of feeling goodness, we feel it and actually has less words to describe it. And that means that's when you're in the ballpark. That's like when you're in love, you know, when you really feel that sense of love and deep sense of connection and passion within yourself, it starts to lose the words. And, if anything, the words start to reduce the experience and it's not like the most ideal. So you kind of know it. And from that deep knowing place, you'll start navigating in a world in a much different place, in a much different way. So just consider, what are your senses exposed to on a day to day basis? What information are you reading that's going to either help you or not help you? How are you getting other support that is actually authoritative to support your intention, which is well being? On some deep fundamental level of our human survival, we all want to feel good, but it's how we're creating the opportunities for that and the things that we're using as tools, as medicines to allow that to be possible. Let's see, James has asked a question. That's an interesting question. So, addiction is a whole other topic. It's very complex, but I can say this: when you feel that you are extremely dependent on anything outside of you for a sense of well being, and that without that thing you would have some sense of pain and suffering and discomfort and displeasure, then that would be where you would question, like, is this something I'm actually addicted to? Am I really foregoing a lot of my self empowerment to that thing that's outside of me? Because essentially, fundamentally, at the soul level of our being, you know, we're already whole. We don't have a void. We don't have anything to fill. There is no emptiness. There is a connection to a deep fullness that exists within us that is beyond just the physical ability to feel that fullness. But when we are feeling that sense of fullness, the body kind of has a sense of like, oh, I feel content. And then from that executive place within the mind, we say to ourselves, self, I'm in this body, and there's a much deeper part of me that feels full and content and whole and complete. And I'm in this body, and I get to explore this reality as a human being in my day to day reality of life. And now there are certain things that I find joy in. So having a cup of coffee brings you joy. That's great. If you feel you need that cup of coffee to give you that jolt of energy, because if you don't have that jolt of energy, you feel depleted in energy and tired and fatigued and so on and so forth, then that's where it becomes tricky. You have to question that need versus like a pleasure and a joy that doesn't cause any compromise or sacrifice to your own well-being, so that if you were like, if I don't have coffee for a month, would I die? Would I feel like my life is not feeling full? No. And if you can answer that question as a no, then you know you're going in the right direction. But if you're like, I can't survive a week without coffee, I can't live without this and live without that, then that's where you have to start questioning, like, is this more in a direction of addiction? Because anything could be addiction. It doesn't have to just be heroin or drugs or sex or anything else or alcohol. Anything that brings us a sense of contentment that exists outside of ourselves, that keeps pulling our attention over and over and over again, and every time at the end of the day we feel some sense of displeasure and emptiness, that's where we have to do our own self-inquiry and see about self-honesty and self-integrity and determine, like, what am I doing? How am I living my life? How am I allowing life to exist and experience through me? um, so hopefully that gives you some level of questioning. um, we can talk about this more at the next chat. Um, so so considering all of this, um, I'm open to any questions, and if you'd like to private message me, I have my own private practice in Philadelphia, and it's called Still Point Ayurveda. You can find me at www.stillpointayurveda.com. I'll include that link on this. Also, I've been offering a weekly Ayurvedic yoga class. It's a specialty type of class every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. And the next one is tomorrow. So if you'd like to register for that, private message me or contact me through my website and email, and then I can add you to the list and send you the appropriate links for payment. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. And hopefully, this created some mental stimulation and had your gears in motion and wheels thinking. Alrighty? Talk to you soon. Thank you all for joining me and listening to me.